Thanks, guys. So let's begin this, what is called a panel, but actually we're hoping it can be more of a broader conversation. And it's why we have set it up in this way. So yes, indeed, there are panelists who are primed and ready to chat with us, but I wanted to involve all of you and to feel this is a more collective process and a way of thinking together, planning together. So over the last day and a half, we've heard a lot, and there's been some really important issues talked about. And for me, in more detail than I'm often hearing in conversations, but really drilling down issues. And a lot of the things that emerged from my point of view were around this notion of cooperation, of building trust amongst the cultural community, of finding ways to be in regular dialogue and connection with each other, and to try and avoid the kind of the tendency to drift into individual competitiveness or the kind of toxicity that can emerge in conversations and in dialogue. So there was a strong both plea, but also I think a strong argument made for the value of collaborative work, of building partnerships, but not just around projects. I mean, looking at the community, the artistic community across Ukraine as a whole, and then beyond that, looking at the relationships, the partnerships that are about building these transnational relationships that both feed the work, but also enable the work within Ukraine to be accessible to a broader, wider audience. So there's a lot of conversation, not necessarily in this room, but in the cafe last night about the bubbles we all operate in. And of course, that's true. And I have this tendency to say we need to enlarge the bubble, but actually, you know, we know that physically, if you do that too much, it pops, and that's not good for anyone. But actually, with bubbles, they have a tendency to coalesce and to create a larger structure. So we were looking at this idea of course, there are bubbles in which we work in our own disciplines. There are bubbles in which we work within our own immediate geographical or cultural context. And there are bubbles we work in terms of the issues we're dealing with internationally and transnationally, but how can those come together? And I heard yesterday, not just from the futurists, but from the projects that were being talked about how they were fed by and were nourished by partnerships and relationships. And that's what we're hoping we can concentrate on now, but with a notion of not purely reflecting on the projects we're doing or the projects we have done, but how that feeds our bigger strategy, how that can contribute to a broadening of the cultural ecology in Ukraine, but then beyond that into Europe and beyond. I mean, maybe America's a different conversation, but you know, the kind of global community that we want to be both engaged with and to be engaged with the cultural community in Ukraine. So that's what we would like to focus on in this conversation. We've identified a few curators and also artist organizers who are already operating, thinking in these ways. And what we're hoping is not to hear specifically too much about the projects, but how that informs their approach to their work, how it's informing their strategy and how they use that to move forward. And I turn to Volodymyr because we're still in disagreement exactly about what this session should do, but you should tell me where you disagree or how you would add to that, Volodymyr.
Дякую, Simon.
Thank you, Simon. Greetings to everyone.
Yeah. Fantastic.
So, in fact, it's not that we disagree. We don't have a different view of the session.
Don't.
I am more in favor of some specific things, and Simon is more about concepts. Maybe that's the only disagreement between us. Thank you, Simon, for setting this broad framework for our today's conversation. But it is also a kind of summary of those 2 days and of those key words and topics that came up from the presentations, from the discussions. We've been trying to enumerate these key words and share them with you. Simon mentioned about solidarity, cooperation inside the community in Ukraine, as well as to project the Ukraine's image from to outside. We've also been talking about the need of long-term planning, about a common vision of the future that we want to arrive at, and to how to solve these long-term tasks, individual tasks or the curator's tasks and collective tasks. We talked about the dialogue, about the culture of dialogue, about the need of non-toxic and inclusive communication with each other, and also about our own bubble in combination with other bubbles. And in my viewpoint, it's also important to remember, because it's not something that we do perfectly well. It's not only about cultural community, but any other community. We can be in good terms inside our community, but when it comes to communication from with different backgrounds and professions, it sometimes might be a challenge. That's why partially we can feel isolated in with our own agenda. We feel trapped in our own feelings. We need allies, but it's sometimes difficult to find those allies. So please also think about it today, and also about solidarity, something that we have been using so much during the full-scale invasion, the need for solidarity, the need for mutual support. And by that, we mean that we are allies under any circumstances. We can have different thoughts, we can have different tastes, we can have different intentions, but we have something that by default unites us and connects us, and this will not change. The circumstances will not change that. And this is important foundation of solidarity that we think should be cultivated. And what's important also, there was a kind of statement that we heard yesterday. In ahead of us, there is long recovery after the war, which has already started while the war is still ongoing. So somebody said there is this simultaneousness of processes. At the same time, we are fighting, and at the same time, we are already rebuilding. And this process will go on for a long time. Recovery is here with us to stay for a long time, and art will be part of this process. It will reflect on the recovery, it will contribute to the recovery process. And for us, it's important for us to think together how to do it. And yesterday, we don't have an exact vision about the future. What do we want to recover to? What do we want to have in particular in the future? So which exact solutions do we want? Whether we have this vision or not, are we moving towards our destination? But you have articulated that these plans of this vision of recovery has to be prepared already now. If you want to share your thoughts about that, please, you're welcome. It's really important. It will resonate with the conversations that took place for these 2 days. So we have very broad framework for today's discussion, but it's about this ethos of coordination, cooperation in within our community and in broader communities, what it should look like. How would we want to work together, to be together? what would be our cooperation with the world, what is the foundation of that. If you can illustrate it with your own personal projects, it's great. Don't go into details of your project, but you can use it as an illustration, as an argument for your words. And we would like to ask you not to follow this sequence, which is on the screen, but just we will somehow we will ask the next speaker to build on what the previous speaker mentioned, so that we have a kind of coherence of our thoughts. And at the end, we will also have time to talk more informally, to exchange thoughts more informally. It's not only about these colleagues that are panelists here, but the rest of you will be able to reflect on what's been discussed as well. So ethos, cooperation, solidarity in the face of challenges, taking into account our personal strategy and goals, institutional goals, and so on. We would like to invite Kateryna. So the floor is yours. Please, your thoughts. I'm sure you have a lot what to say. You've been working a lot in Ukraine and abroad, and this exhibition is one of the illustrations of these topics that we want to discuss. Please share your thoughts. Thank you. I would like to indicate that even though we have the assembly Beyond the Green Grass and the exposition is called Beyond the Silence, this is just a pure coincidence, but I will give you an example based on the exhibition that is here in Gem Factory, and those who haven't seen it is, please, you are welcome to have a look at it. Our organization, we started working actively abroad since 2022. And of course, our initial intentions were to spread information through the photos and to explain all these internal processes that are happening in Ukraine and support Ukrainian photographers. And in 2 active years of work, it became understood that to show the works of only Ukrainian photographers is not enough. It doesn't work anymore. If 2022 we were accepted for that, and there was this craving to hear about anything from Ukraine, just to understand it, then in 2023, just to hear about Ukrainian art or exhibition or the topic of war was not already well perceived, but the war is ongoing and we have to continue to talk it. And then there is a question how to do it. So it was decided, taking these practical considerations into account, so to work through these issues that we are having now, we thought it would be good to use the dialogue with other countries that have similar experiences that can relate to our experience as well and have related problems. And if to talk about the war in general, then we can make it the focus very narrow, because only those who can talk about the war if they have the experience of war. But if we talk about the related problems of war, like the like stealing people or the censure, this is already something additional. And then we have bridges with other countries, and that's what we've been trying to do, where we have 5 countries, and it looks like these 5 countries are not interconnected. Myanmar, Kazakhstan, Nigeria. So this is countries are very far away from each other. But thanks to this dialogue and cooperation and communication, we found out that there are a lot of things in common between those countries, among those countries. And it was important to understand that we need to stop talking about ourselves. We have also to learn to listen and to hear to others. And if we learn to listen to others, we will be able to have these parallels with other activities, to build those bridges. And we will also be able to be listened by others. So to hear to each other, to listen to each other is a very important factor in the dialogue and cooperation. And I will also give you another example of the exhibition that we did in 2023. It was also a kind of breaking point in my curator activity. This was exhibition dedicated to protest movement, Iran, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, and Georgia. And again, the countries seem dissimilar, and the protest movement were analyzed, which took 30 years before, and it was presented only in Poland. And this exhibition, at this exhibition, the audience of international audience was actually crying. I didn't know why. If I show the war, it's okay. If we demonstrate protest, people start crying, even if there is this active response. But it turned out very simple and evident. This is all about this experience that they had. Each person had this experience of a protest. So each person looked at the exhibition and they reflected through their own experience. So thanks to this emphatic connection, this exposition was emotionally accepted. So for myself, we identified it as an important point. This is to listen and to hear, to have this dialogue connection. And another point, this is to find these empathic connections that would potentially evoke interest to our problems, to cooperation with us, and to provoke people to hear to what is going on in Ukraine. This is really resonates within me, and it also repeats our experience in Ukrainian Institute after the full-scale invasion. It's not only talking about ourselves, but find some common topics. So just a small remark, I had a kind of discussion, a dialogue with Oksana Zabushko, who vice versa, she was against this statement. We shouldn't come to another country and try to find common things and common topics. Our culture is unique in its own, and we don't need any additional voices. So that was actually a point of disagreement between us. It was a bit unusual, but these things that you are saying, really resonate within me. So maybe could you please reflect on it? And maybe Liza can also continue whether our artists and managers, curators are ready to this approach, not to talk about themselves, not to think only about their own experience and practice, not only to talk about Ukraine and that's it. Are they ready for that? So do they feel like they can use your approach? My response will be very subjective, but I think it's not about the question whether we are ready, it's a process. And sooner or later, we will have to admit it because otherwise nobody will listen to us. Thank you. I prepared a kind of different speech, but the beauty of the discussion is that we just go with the flow. When listening to Kate, I understood one statement which I didn't prepare for today, but this is something that I often turn to. At the beginning of the full-scale invasion, in different countries, there was big demand for cooperation with Ukrainians, Ukrainian artists, curators, and so on, to represent Ukrainian culture. In many cases, it was like opportunist projects. We just needed to do something. They were not deeply worked out. These were just the gestures of solidarity rather than deep interest, which is not too bad as well. But with time, when there was so many requests like this in 2022, 2023, in my case, for example, there were many institutions in different countries who worked readily with curators who were physically in that location. In my case, it was Venice. I received many invitations and requests for cooperation because it's more productive to work with a person who is in the same locality, who you can see and work with offline rather than online. But at that point, I had a thought that suddenly we Ukrainian curators and artists, there are a lot of us. We had project in Venice, in Stuttgart, in London, in Berlin, then again in Berlin, and then Berlin for the third time. But in fact, not that many people were there who had existing international experience. There were not so many curators who, prior to full-scale invasion, had worked not only with institutions abroad, but also with non-Ukrainian topics and non-Ukrainian artists, just to generalize. It doesn't mean there are no curators at all. There is Katya Butanova, Katya Radchenko, but it wasn't me, for example, even though I wanted to be such a curator, but it wasn't so. Even though we had artists from different countries, it was in 2024 at Gem Factory. I didn't have such personal experience, but it's an interesting point that when, as a curator, I really wanted to discuss broadly beyond this opportunist approach about the war in Ukraine and how to represent Ukraine quickly to those people who don't know us. But before that, actually, I was a curator in Ukraine. I read a lot. I consider myself to be quite broad, not so focused as Oksana Zabushko. This is something that I want, but I don't have this optic vision. So for me now, I'm really happy that these cases of this quick response and cooperation of Ukrainian curators who ended up in different countries and institutions when they are already there for the fourth year, and when all of this becomes broad cooperation, when you don't have to have a quick exhibition about the war, when you can focus on broader topics, when you can not only to talk about the war, but just to talk about Ukraine on the same level as about other different topics important. So it's about becoming a subject, but I personally did a different choice. I understood for personal reasons I wanted to come back to Ukraine, and I don't want to continue my international career, but I just want to find my place where it awaits me. So I'm purely focused on Ukraine-related questions and to take my niche, if to be brief. But still, I'm really happy that more and more international projects, there are projects not made by Ukrainians, but there are international projects about Ukraine. For example, about Katya Radchenko's exhibition, when we have this view of Ukraine that is purely international. Thank you.
Can I just with Liza, though, follow up for a second? Lisa, can I extend that conversation a little bit? I'm just curious, with this commitment then to being based back in Ukraine, clearly your project still will have an international connection. And I'm wondering what the elements are. Can you identify the frameworks, the structures that you need to have in order to make that work happen?
You mean, what are the steps to make my internal Ukrainian work visible outside?
Yeah, and you can speak in Ukrainian.
Yeah, same old stuff, like international partners and support. Наприклад, в мене є моя.
I have my own institution in Ukraine, the gallery. I have some art studies background as a historian of art. I can write tests and publish books. So, yeah, I would like to call this the internal Ukrainian problems, because the topic of my research is in the Ukrainian territory, in Ukrainian context. So it's not that interesting doing that from Vienna. But I still that it's not just about, the vacuum, something which is within Ukrainian bubble. No. everything I do, gallery has international cooperation, of course. We take part in different fairs. We had season displays and exhibitions. So we have partnerships, and particularly long-term partnership, not situational, not one-time partnership, no, but the one where there is the planning from both sides, not just to do one-time event for the grant or for some opportunity as it was in 2022-23. That was an honest will to have the solidarity, but only for one time. So I don't want to devalue this concept. We just have to understand how we need to have this long-term and deep connections and relationships.
Thank you. I wanted to turn to Anton. Anton is joining us online. Yesterday we were screening Let the Body Speak, the dance program that he commissioned when the full-scale invasion happened. And Anton is both an artist but also an organizer. And I'm curious, Anton, from your perspective, if some of these issues are resonating with the way you're seeking to build the kind of platforms and the connections for contemporary dance, both within Ukraine and in the wider world. Can you give us a sense of what your current thinking and strategy is?
Thank you very much, Simon. Greetings to all those present. Thanks for the invitation. What I would like to say is, so first of all those issues or the questions that pop up while working with international actors or partners or some disconnection.
Anton is very quiet.
He's not usually very quiet. Чи мене чути?
Yeah, you're back.
Антоне,
ми тебе не чули, точніше, секунд 15.
We haven't heard you for 15 seconds, so please repeat what you have said. What I said was, more or less the same questions and problems arise, but still there are some specificities connected with the development of the modern dance as the professional form of art in Ukraine. And so the specificities bring about the ways that we as an organization, I as an artist, choose to set these connections, or how to present Ukrainian projects, or how to create the joint of Ukrainian collaborations between international actors and international artists and Ukrainian artists as well. So before the full war, and even right now, I would like to say that there are just maybe a few top-class international artists in Ukraine. I mean, of contemporary dance. I mean, those artists who would be well known in Europe, who would be renowned as cool, great talents, choreographers, the ones who would be invited for the joint collaborations with international professionals. So when as it was said, in 2022, in 2023, yes, there was cooperation directed and aiming to fulfill this interest there was a big stir about what is happening here in Ukraine. Some people were thirsty about that. Some people were totally unaware of what is the contemporary Ukrainian dance is all about. So sometimes people say, do you dance in Ukraine in that time? Not just trying to survive, you dance also? Yeah. So because of that, this cooperation today is primarily directed at enhancing the professional ability, professional skills and capabilities, especially with regard to the possibility to integrate Ukrainian contemporary dance within European community. So people Ukrainians right now are at the same level as European companies, choreographers, organizations. And it is really so. I can say that right now it's more about even active educational process, and Ukrainian artists are part of it. So those who we support as organization, whom we promote to take part in some workshops or residencies, etc., from Ukraine. I mean, and also those who left Ukraine from 2022 and they right now live in Europe and they look for the opportunities for themselves. So that's people who receive certain experience of how to reside and how to work in the international dance community, because the majority of such people, they have never, and I accentuate here, they have never had such an experience prior to the war. So, Volodya, you wanted to say something? Yes, I have a small follow-up to your remarks. So, you mentioned the contemporary art community, I mean Ukrainian community. So right now here we have people who are dear friends from the visual art area. Not all of them, but the majority. And you are only one representative from the contemporary dance area. So could you tell more about this community? Do they consider themselves to be community? How, what are the connections between them? How it is represented abroad as the community? Is it like one subject, or it's more like individual initiatives working simultaneously or in opposition to one another? Because I think that people here, they are not that aware about your kitchen. So dwell upon that. It's a difficult question. And I started to plunge into that basically at the end of 2024, 2025, we have been working over the project aiming at researching the community. So I was on top of the series of interviews, so around 30 individual interviews I have done with Ukrainian choreographers who are staying in Ukraine or those who fled because of the war, I mean, those migrants. So, and that was a question. So, did you feel the sense of community before, or do you feel it right now? What's going on generally? So, in fact, before the full-fledged invasion, so, yeah, generally speaking, there is a vast dancing community in Ukraine. They get united around some street styles of dance, which are also called contemporary dance. So that's the complexity of understanding what people have in mind when they say contemporary dance. So speaking about some, yeah, so what do we do? Yeah, we do contemporary dance. That's the separate community. And I believe that right now it gets united around our platform because we have many international projects, but still, generally, I would like to say that before the full-fledged invasion, that these were local communities in big cities like Odesa, Kharkiv, Lviv, Dnipro, Kyiv. And there were less communities that get around some dancing schools, and there are like strong leaders, strong choreographers. So sometimes communities can be also getting united around some famous bands like Kyiv Modern Ballet. And those people who are connected with these teams and the Rado Poklitaro choreographer activities. So also, I think that this community is pretty strong because it unites people who used to take part into Zielonka Fest, dancing festival, which we organized annually starting from 2010. In 2014, foreign dancers joined the fest. So that's the way how we reached out. That's the way how we set this connection between Ukraine and Europe. Because what was prior to this, I would call it minimum effort. So right now, talking about the current situation of the communities, I would say that many of those who are working in Europe now, so they mentioned that they feel themselves to be the part of the European communities, dancing communities, and they can explain what do they mean by the feeling, by this feeling. On the other hand, they say that they consider themselves and feel themselves to be the part of the Ukrainian community. I mean, that they belong to the Ukrainian contemporary dance in this way or another. And also there are people who feel disconnected from everything. So, yeah, they just are surrounded by some few people. Thank you, Anton. I would like to give the floor to Olha Honchar, who is here and not listening to us, because this topic is really pressing and topical. What is the community? How does it react towards the full-fledged challenges? Could you please give your ideas on or some feedback on what Anton has mentioned? So what is the situation with museum in Ukraine? How do you feel this topic? How do you talk this over in the context on the horizontal cooperation between museum, because that's totally different area, because contemporary dance right now is operating in the independent sector, but museum, that's the state and municipal organizations, they also have different laws and different dynamics. So could you please give us this helicopter view from your perspective? I'm a woman, I'm a multitasker, I can listen, I can read, I can answer, so jack of all trades, and even posing is my thing. So as for the museum, so first and foremost, we have to have this understanding that everything depends on the location of the museum. We have some museums that were looted, some of them were destroyed, evacuated. Sometimes museums just stopped exposing their exhibitions. There are museums that continue operating. So everyone whom I enumerated, they continue their work, but in different ways, and it depends on the region. So obviously that those who are closer to the Russian border, yeah, they have a lot of difficulties, and other museums who are located distantly, yes, the conditions are better in this way, if I can put it like this. So it's worth mentioning that our museum community, our family, it showed great solidarity and self-organization and cooperation. Starting from the full-fledged war, we keep in touch, we cooperate with one another, and we are inspired by our meetings, meeting with the Ministry of Culture, which was during the first days of the full war. They say that museums have to find themselves where they have to be evacuated to. Museums need to have resources for evacuation. So good luck. Well, this is what they said. And that was a great push for the solidarity and cooperation. We understood that it's up to us where we're going to drown or not. So therefore, we had a range of NGOs who do a great deal of work when it comes to the evacuation. They help people. So we have different partners. We have one chat in Messenger, we have another chat in Messenger. So there are museums who also do their part in this saving process. So they receive people, they become humanitarian hubs. Some of the museums are like bomb shelters, and there the community hide from the shellings. A museum are the centers for mental support. They also receive donations for the army. So yeah, they go for all the processes, for all of the ongoing processes, and even those who do not have exhibitions, they have the temporary exhibitions. They cooperate with contemporary artists. They organize different forums. So a lot of things is going on. That's like insider information. But also regularly, we as the representatives from museum and public sector, we have these meetings with Ministry of Culture, of course. So we do not, burn this bridge with them. And we are always eager to get contacted but actually sometimes when we have this meeting, it looks like they're not aware. I mean, those from the ministry, they are not aware of what is going on with us, and you just start telling your story from scratch. So there is one key moment, which is, so we have the international museum community. Not every participant showed solidarity with Ukraine. They're not pro-Ukrainian, and we will not forget about that. But there are those who want to get back to the cooperation with Russia, with Russian money, because we cannot promote, we cannot give them money. We can just sell our charisma and multitasking, and our expertise. Also, right now is that we have another problem as what to do with the Russian repercussions. Yes, and another key issue is that Russian stole a lot of our items, a lot of our funds, and right now they label it to be Russian, and they will consider that their legacy. So obviously, that there are different claims from interested organizations, but Russian stance is that they are first Russians and then they are museum workers. So they are not about dealing with these ethical questions that we are raising. So we have a lot of tasks and we need to tackle them on the international level. But it means that you sometimes split apart from what is important for you to work for your community here, or to start dealing with the international diplomacy. But it also takes time. You need a lot of money for that, and certain competencies and skills which you are catching up down the road. And very often, it's a great deal of your psychological, mental resources, moral, ethical resources, etc., etc. Then you come back to Ukraine, and just are distracted from these international events.
So here is a question. We are here and now, and what inspires you the most? So we've been here for 2 days here, communicating with each other, exchanging thoughts, and whether you want to come back to the international forum and you will be crucified there. Why do you have manicure? Why have you washed your hair even? What are you talking about? When will you be at peace with Russians finally? So this is also about your personal choice, who wants to do what. But at the same time, our museums continue to do a lot of projects. There is exhibitions as inter-museum curators work. But this is all, there is a range of communities abroad of our communities who had been formed before 2014 and 2022. It's not the first time that Ukrainians are migrating. So there is also an issue of them being engaged and active. For example, those that are in the US and Canada, where there are Ukrainian museums created by Diaspora, whether they want to be engaged, what they are doing now. And they might not be doing what they are actually capable of. So here can be the whole lecture of presenting our museum's activities, but I don't know any museum worker who would stop there despite all these circumstances. But of course, each person has their own issues, but we have a lot of work, in particular, documenting. We go around the museums. It's about documenting what was going on during World War II and how Ukraine is presented there. So this is something from our territory of horror, of terror. But some other museums also have a lot to talk about our artists who are presented abroad. So we have a lot of spheres to focus on, but there is not a single person who would say, I'm not going to do anything. It's obvious that there can be some time when you don't want anything. Sometimes you want to be highly engaged. But of course, you have to take stock of your own resources as well. This example about the Second World War is about how it is important from the viewpoint of cultural diplomacy, external representation of Ukraine, and also for our internal needs, because this is the topic that we cannot talk abroad before we process it at home. So this is something that we have tracked in our work when having dialogue with the foreign museums, academic centers, and so on. As soon as you start raising these sensitive topics, you can immediately feel that there is lack of internal processing of these topics. So it might be like, it might look like as internal Ukrainian discussion, but it's also important for foreign community. In 3 years, I have traveled around so much. I'm already interested in staying here. I have fewer business trips, and I'm interested in focusing my energy on Ukrainian issues and donating for Shohavich Museum. Half of the people who were present here yesterday have already donated. Thank you so much. And thank you for touching upon the topic of Ukrainians abroad and the topic of foreign institutions that Ukrainian museum sphere is working with. Here, I would like to expand this topic and maybe just throw a ball to Kateryna. She is the head of the Ukrainian Institute in Germany. Katya, you are working in a very complicated environment where Russia narratives, Russian presence, and the level of Russian infiltration is very high, and it's very damaging to us, to Ukrainians, and it's an object of work. So please, could you share your thoughts? What should be the solidarity among the artists here in Ukraine? What should we do here in Ukraine? And what should Ukrainians in Germany do? This new diaspora or old diaspora? So what are they doing already? Do they have solidarity with each other? Do they have a common voice? Because all the participants of the assembly know it from the inside, but let's have a look at it from your perspective, like from Berlin to Ukraine. So the Second World War is a very interesting issue in German narratives, because for Germans, only now they started to hear us, to our narratives, that your wrongly perceived responsibility after the World War II and your feeling of guilt in relation to Russians doesn't prevent you from learning the new European reality and having a proper look at Russians. Germans are not happy to hear this, but I was recently at a panel. The topic was restitution and guilt. And one but last panelist were our Konstantin, and the first panelist was director of the State Library in Germany, and there was a Polish woman in between them, a Polish curator and special of provenance, and it was like a joke actually. And firstly, the German director said, we have such a positive cooperation with Russians in Russian-German museum dialogue. I don't understand why Ukrainians and Polish have their own strange opinion, and this cooperation is not so successful. It was understandable who were the Ukrainians and Polish in the audience because they had big eyes, and it was already happening now. And the Polish colleague explained the situation, what is the issue. And then Konstantin Kish also explained that when you are moving over our hands and taking the stolen things to Russians, this is something that we don't like. We want our things to be returned to us. So it looks like these are simple things, but we sometimes talk about some abstract things, but on simple terms, these things can come up. And it's also necessary to stress that the Russian narrative appeared there not just like that. It appeared because of the huge investments made by Russia on purpose. Even when we supported the exhibition in Leipzig, when there was a video about this gas pipeline, Russian gas pipeline, that via this gas pipeline, there was a kind of cultural pipeline. And at the locations where this gas pipeline was being constructed, there were cultural events taking place, and it was all funded by Russians. So a huge number of events that speak about how it is cool to be Russians and be part of the Russian culture, it was funded by Russians. And I must say that it's a very simple truth. It's the truth lies in money, basically. And I could witness it as a translator. When there was some Russian money in the air, people changed their ethical standards, and the wish for Russian money was very strong among German institutions. And now switching to diaspora, I can see that this Ukrainian civil society, it is present within old diaspora, but in the East, there is only new diaspora, and these CSOs are rather new. This is the place where I stay now. So they started working only recently, and in the West, there is more older Ukrainian diaspora with conservative values. It's about Plast and church organizations. So Plast in Berlin and in Munich cannot be interconnected, because after my son came to Berlin, they could not understand what the organization was doing, because Plus with us, it's not so military, it's more like NGO. So there was a different impression of this organization. So I said that I will not take my kid to Plus if you are going to tell that the girls should cook and the boys should start the fire. But our diaspora, moving again to money, we are all fighting for grants. We are competing for grants. And it's not a simple struggle for money on the territory of Germany, because among Russian organizations, there are more of them. And they have this tradition of connections and power. Germans are aware of them. They are ready to pay for them. And they are friends with them for a long time. And now when the Ukrainians came in the first years of full-scale invasion, at the beginning, only Russians got money. And there were a lot of problems like this, because even those Russians who don't like Putin, they are still imperialists. And this issue was voiced. I raised it and many other. The situation is slowly changing, but still this market, this pot with money is really small and we are competing. So this year I can hear as well that a lot of Ukrainian organizations didn't get grants from Germans, while the funding for Russians stays on the same level. So I don't even know. We work with them, but just Russians, they are shameless. That's their advantage, their strength in their shamelessness. Because we have our own self-censure, whether I can talk about it. Maybe it will be an exaggeration of what I'm doing. Maybe it's a manipulation. So we are checking against our own values. So I'm checking whether it's okay to do something within my community there in Germany, and they don't do it. They are just very loud, and that's it. And another example, recently there was a Russian book fair in Berlin, and there is a Babelplatz in Berlin where Germans where Nazi burned books, and now you have a monument to these burned books. It's a kind of cut piece. There is a piece like in the kind of pit in the ground, and you can see shelves there. So the Russians are organizing this big fair in the central location. It's very expensive, and they call it Babelplatz, using the same word, this trauma, and they call it with the same word. We would never do this. They just gave this strange name, and they just collected a lot of money for this. So our problem is our ethics, actually. But this is the framework that we have selected. So it's like entertainment park Auschwitz, but this entertainment park would talk about poor Russians, and they would call it Auschwitz, and then they would take money from Germans. Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to some of those ideas, Katya, you were talking about. Last year, I was at your conference in Berlin, which was very much about the responsibilities of museums, with all the state museums there. And the conversations I was having, there was a growing understanding that, yes, historically there were these strong relationships with Russia, but what was lacking was their relationships with Ukraine specifically on an institutional level. And I'm wondering, from your point of view, is that ethical, that moral position shifting the way the state museums are functioning? Is it happening at an institutional level, or is it really the independent artists and curators who are now the ones who are building those bridges and making those connections? Or maybe Daria, who is working both in Germany and Ukraine, has a perspective on that too. But I'm curious if you're seeing a shift from last year, from that awareness raising that you were really a part of. You can say no.
I would tend to say no. But now I had another meeting with the museum. They have a small Ukrainian collection, and they want to do something with it, and they feel bad that this connection is labeled in a funny way, and some parts of the collection are they have like huge boxes with glass doors, and on the top it says like Russians, and on the Russians you also can see Ukrainian stuff, like it's really something from Ukraine, something from Buryatia, something from Russia, and it's all in this box with Russians. They also have box Ukrainians, I must say. And so they want to do something, but they ask me, can you find the money for us to do something? So they will be interested in doing something if you bring in the money. You can persuade them. But if they have to take the money from their own budget, which is very limited and now more limited than before, they are not ready to do it because they say Ukrainian exhibitions don't sell. So it can only be something which you can fund, which so yeah, to bring this glamour. Also, so one thing we do with decolonization is telling, oh, okay, what you think is Russian is Ukrainian. So actually, it brings money if you show so-called Russian artists who are actually Ukrainians. But we don't have this kind of glamour thing which Russians have until now, and no wonder. And yeah, so I don't see the shift really. I see that there was like one time you were talking about, this one time willingness to help, but not really a shift.
So Daria, who is working both within institutions but also independently as a curator in Berlin. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have a question?
Maybe I can speak after Daria. I just had a comment regarding this cooperation with Germany and also some other countries in this regard of decolonization.
That's good now.
Yeah, okay, yeah, thank you. I will just jump in quickly. My name is Natalia Matsenko, with whom we didn't meet yesterday. Yeah, just wanted to share shortly the experience because I've been working in these recent years in different countries, like in Poland, in Denmark, in Germany a lot. Also, now we started some cooperation with France, actually together with Ukrainian Institute, and it was very interesting for me to compare different responses in the institutions in different countries, and also with the Ukrainian communities in different countries, because we also had these cooperations. And I just wanted maybe to have a bit more optimistic turn in direction of Germany, because it really depends on the institutions. And I witnessed a lot that, like in Berlin, for example, yeah, of course, there is this very powerful Russian influence, definitely, that we have to deal with somehow. But I also had some positive experiences in Western Germany, and I think that Germany really also has this issue that is still very strong, of this division between Eastern and Western Germany, and you can really tell it from on a practical level. In Western Germany, for example, we had some positive experiences in rural area. It's like, let's say, German Donbass, this post-industrial area, and actually there are some cities that are partner cities with Ukrainian towns and cities. I had an experience of relabeling in the collection of one of these museums, like from Russian to Ukrainian artists, and it was their initiative actually. And we've been talking about some potential cooperations with museum in Cologne and maybe in Düsseldorf. So basically, this is something that just not to say, like, I don't want to generalize, just to say that from my perspective, I really feel that these efforts, they make sense. So it happens really slowly. It's tough work. And of course, definitely there are many institutions who will say, like, first bring your money and then we will do something. It happens too. But it's not always like that. So basically, it's just to say this as, somehow motivation that we still have to work on that. And also in this residency with Ukrainian and French Institute in Paris last year, we started this work with several collections in Paris on decolonizing the art that is labeled as Russian in these collections. And there is a lot of this, of course. You can understand this connection in France. It's really like not weaker than in Germany. But there was a positive response, and we are all going to continue this process. So yeah, maybe it's just a bit to cheer up, because I don't want to, to say everything is cool, guys, because it's not. And we have a lot of work, but still there are some nice cases. So yeah, thank you, and sorry for intervening.
We deeply value your optimism. But Daria, are you equally optimistic?
Oh, I live in Berlin, so Okay, я прийду. I will switch to Ukrainian.
First of all, I agree with both my colleagues. My name is Daria Prodabailo. I wanted to say that really Berlin is very peculiar city, and the experiences in all over Germany are quite different. I will want to cover a lot, but regarding museums, we started to talk about institutions. I would like to say that the support that Ukraine received from the biggest fund in Germany, I mean, not only material support, there are more colleagues from Ukrainian museums. It's about like vehicles, evacuation, but we had this support. Another fund also did a lot to support Ukrainian experts and museum workers. And during those years, so Ukraine was recognized at this highest level. Last year, there was a big conference in one of the museums, and there were Ukrainian museum workers from big regional museums and museums in Germany. This year, I came to Lviv after the conference, which was called The Future of Collection, that was organized by this main fund in Germany. And I was asked there, how we are doing, how the museum activities are developing. There is interest to Ukrainians, there is attention to Ukrainians, but unfortunately, they usually focus on the image of Ukraine as victims. So when it comes to professional, there is a niche, and we are staying within this niche. From my personal experience of working in German institutions, I would like to say that I also felt to be caged, that I wanted to be free from, both successfully and unsuccessfully. When I worked in the Museum of Modern Art, and the exhibition that we had, it was the exhibition of German artists who lived in Germany for 20 years, but had some Ukrainian roots on her mother's side. And this opportunity to present Ukrainian exhibition and narrative only happened through this way. So to have a collective exhibition with Ukrainian artists would be unacceptable. But about bringing up Ukrainian narratives, it was difficult. I had to protect our right not to have Dostoevsky citations in the catalog on Ukrainian exhibition. So these are very primitive and simple things, but there is a lot of kind of hidden work that is not visible. And attention is paid to these small details that from the viewpoint of Ukraine can be a bit ridiculous, but these things are important. And there is misunderstanding from the side of German experts. I was the only Ukrainian in the German team. And this not knowing, it evokes fear, and they don't want to be engaged and work together. We are young, we are unknown, we are young experts, and even to compare with the conference 2 days ago in Germany, so these are elderly people, 60, 55 plus, and now there were we young people, and we have just to admit this age gap or age difference, or maybe not. What do you mean?
And therefore, so with the cooperation, we had the work created by the artist, and it was the part of the collection. So that was the work depicting World War II. So that was the parallel between the occupation and between the shooting of Ukrainians from the Nazi Germany, from the Soviet Union. So that was a good approach towards the German society and to the museum realm. But there was no room for Ukrainian art, therefore I made an exhibition in my office. So yeah, we have the floor where there was a curator to familiarize our colleagues with the work of Ukrainian art, especially to those who fled Ukraine because of the war and came to Berlin. So the question was, is there any difference between Russian and Ukrainian languages? But also there is another question. It all depends on where you can watch the works of the Ukrainian artists. Yes, that was only one institution, but the famous oligarch, I'm not going to promote him, but yeah. So it's important to understand whose artists are representative from the Ukrainian modern contemporary stage. So that's talking about the practical moments. That's one of the greatest need. We need to create the state or some joint forum platform between the NGOs and the state where Ukrainian artists will be more visible. And also, especially where they are located, because there are those nomadic artists, some of them fled Ukraine, some of them stayed in Ukraine. So right now I would like to advocate Ukrainian artists to cooperate with institutions, with big museums, because I think that contemporary artists, they are very important assets for us. They can build up, they can bridge these connections between the past and the contemporary time. So they are bold in their actions. Yeah, we had a successful cooperation this year with Mariana Previn. She's from Donetsk region, but she lives in Berlin for 10 years. We had artistic intervention to Humboldt Forum, one of the biggest institutions that is dedicated to the decolonization collections, and there were halls dedicated to the war. There was Ukraine represented there, but there was Russian narrative about the refugees from Luhansk and Donetsk region from 2014. So even up till now, this narrative that Ukraine doesn't need its Ukrainians, it's still ongoing. So, and only the modern artists, they come there and they have this interaction with society, because in Germany there are more than 1 million Ukrainians right now. There are 1,200,000 right now. I would like also to tell briefly that after the conference in Berlin about the future of museum and the future of collections, right now it's a right time for us to join up, because it's the transition time from the past to the present to the future. And the big organizations that were set in the past, and they function and they have this bureaucratic system, but they do not feel that they will be relevant in the future. So there will be competition, and we have to think about it as well. So right now, big changes are upcoming, and we have place for the new narratives, for the new expressions, especially for those who are not represented before. But we need to be proactive. We cannot be just, a victim and just beg for something. No, we need to cover this niche and occupy this niche with our background, with our knowledge and money. So apart from decolonization, it's important to work out the new knowledge which will be relevant in this global world, especially for the Ukrainians, Ukrainian artists, Ukrainian culture. We elaborate the knowledge about how to live in time of uncertainty. This is what our world needs right now. We are quite resistant. We learn about that. It's in our genes. Yeah, we are from the survivors generation, and yeah, we survived a lot of more wars, etc. We also have the international diversity. We have it here in Ukraine. And also, there is understanding that only by means of this multifactorial experience we can team up with the partners and allies. That's the only chance for us to survive. That's our last straw. We feel this existential threat, even in Europe. And there is understanding that only through this big collapse with our neighbors, it is possible to have the joint future and protect our values, and not just to be engulfed by the dictatorships. And the last but not least, it's innovation. And I'm round up. We have 1 minute only. All right, I'm gonna round up. So innovations. What right now is really relevant abroad, or what was the discovery. That's the digitalization of Ukraine. That's one of the vast systems that supports Ukraine in survival. The ministry, our Ministry of Digital Transformation, shares its experience with foreign experts. This is what they can learn from us. So it's important to have this exchange and this knowledge and innovations. This can be something which we can bring to the table. So that's the exchange of technology. Yeah, we need to have these technologies and methodologies in cultural area. We can share that as well. Because really this digitalization and this speed in this world and AI, so everything is just skyrocketing speed. So it means like we need to share, because otherwise we need to have this, we need to have not just about money, but also these partnerships and allies. Thank you. Thank you, Dasha. You touched very interesting topics, especially that Ukraine can export expertise. Also, it's important to have situational and effective, innovative solutions and artistic feedback about what is going on around. So I'm thinking that yes, we are good at tactics, but we are still bad at strategy. I mean, of the Ukrainian in this world. Of course, I generalize. But what Russians are good at, they are good at strategy, right? In the long-term game. But maybe sometimes they fail with tactics. Maybe some of it would be food for thought, or you would like to reflect upon. But I would like to give the floor to our online participant, Kateryna. And I would like to ask Kateryna to give her feedback on what has been said, and we encourage her insights in the area of music community in Ukraine, and among those who are abroad, because music is kind of like passive or inert in the international area, especially with regard to the decolonization and about the history of art. But generally about this perception of those Ukrainian messages and narratives that we have been working for 3.5 years. So that's, unfortunately, it's very difficult work to carry on, especially with regard to the systemic changes in Ukraine's favor. So Katya, do you concur with my ideas, especially what's going on right now in the musical area? Is there any solidarity or common vision or long-term vision ahead? Thanks, Volodymyr. I understand the pain of the question, especially abroad. It's true. It's very difficult, to start or to change or to uproot these narratives, because I think that, yes, people abroad on Christmas will go to Luskunchik, the nutcracker. So how we can exchange that? It's really challenging task, especially with regard to classical music. So I would like to share the experience of my organization's Kyiv Contemporary Music Days and the key takeaways that we have. I agree with the idea of the core authorship, core creativity, not only a representation of Ukrainian music, but using this as a tool when you do projects together and you play long term. Yes, that is what I agree with the previous speakers. That is vital. And that also brings about better results, because then these connections, they are still present, even separately from the organizations. I mean, connections with composers, with some bands, especially when musicians from the EU, yes, they perform Ukrainian music. So then it doesn't matter whether they cooperate with our organization. This on their playlist, and they can repeat our Ukrainian pieces. So yeah, there are a lot of things that resonated with me during this speaker speaking, especially about the dialect. Yes, I support that. It's important to hear, to listen. It's important to give something back. So we badly need these forums for cooperations. We had such a project in Berlin, in Kyiv as well, using different representatives of the music community, cooperating with them. So the musicians from Germany also joined up, so it was easy to bring those messages to the table, the one that we needed. So right now Daria mentioned about the possibility of setting up this platform where we could cooperate with the artists with regard to museums and exhibitions. So I would like to say that yes, we support such idea. So starting from 2022, we received a lot of requests for cooperation, to look for someone who is open for such cooperation. So right now we can say that yes, we had a project on our side. We have the portfolio which has which unites the representatives of the contemporary music. So these are composers and representatives from different organizations, conductors, and even media representatives. So it's very important, I would say, document which we can provide our potential partner with, or those who are stakeholders, potential stakeholders. Yeah, what is also important to remember, Liza mentioned yesterday, my colleague, that we plan to play the long game, and that's true. But we need resource distribution for that, also understanding how to do that. And also we need to take care of our mental health of the whole organization. When you try to plan somehow and to build up some perspective which helps to stay healthy, stay mentally healthy. And I would like to say that it's very important to provide support or core support within your community. And also just try to reach out, to move along. And one of the examples that I can share with you, this is one of the projects that we implemented. We do it teamed up with the Netherlands with this. So we also have the grant program which supports the contemporary academic music, but also, so during this year, 80 projects were supported. I mean, performative art projects were supported. So yeah, that is what Simon was talking about, to get outside the bubble, yeah, and scale up. Thank you, Kateryna. You were talking about this long-term game. Could you please think about this? Are we ready for that, to play the long game despite the fatigue, burnout, frustration, and some personal losses and despair? So how we as community or communities are ready to play such a game? Because honestly, speaking about how Russia is good at that. So I'm sure that this is deep-rooted into the imperial nature of Russia. Imperial doesn't consider itself to be temporary or something that will be ended soon or with some clear borders. No, imperial agenda stretches forward like 100 years ahead, etc. So I think that's quite informative ethos, especially with regard to the cultural, diplomatic personality of Russia. So regardless of the political process, regardless of those on some, there is also this longevity or cultural expansion of imperial ideas. So this is what we have been suffering from for decades. So how we as a community, both those represent a state and private sector, how ready are we to play this long game? And coming to what we started this session with, I mean, we talk about the need, we need to set such long-term goals, but how we have to reach them, that's an open question. So I will give the floor to Ms. Anya Kopylova. Could you please share your experience with us? So, judging from your experience working with the artists, from the people from the international sector, with people from international actors, so how do you think? What about the world? Is the world ready to play this long game along with us? Thank you very much. A very good question. I have been listening to our colleagues, and I'm ready to share the opinions that I have heard. I even took notes about this of war of attrition, and we don't need to prove anyone that we are okay. No, we just have to show our professionalism. We are stable partners, and people can cooperate with us. So it is not one time a project. We have the possibilities to work regardless of what is the state of events. Yeah, we are ready. We are ready to play a long game, and we're ready for the long-term partnership. And I think this is what our foreign partners are aiming at. Because starting from the full-fledged invasion, there were a lot of messages that we are ready to back you up, and especially on the sample of Voloshyn Gallery, those who have been working with the partners, and cooperation survives. It continues for over 5 years. So we really deserve this trust. So we need to stay strong. We have to clear these Russian narratives. We do not need to mop the floor, as it was mentioned, but we need to mop this 100 years of Russian propaganda, and it will take a while. Yeah, we need to be sustainable in these steps, because Ukraine really was in the shadow of Russia for a long time, but right now we are in this international context. But we need to stay deep-rooted there, and it takes time. We need to work that over. We have to understand that we need to work hard, and I think that is essential. And also talking about building the strategy, yes, we are reactive, but our weakness is being proactive. So we prove to ourselves that we are active, we can be involved, included in different activities. We can be resilient, we can make collabs, we can be united, we can create communities, and we can fight for the result. But still, we need some rest just to think, what is next? What's our strategy? What do we need to do? What's another milestone? And I think that's pretty obvious in work, because all of the organizations right now, they are working over the fact that, we were trying to survive over 3 years. Right now, people start building plans. So, we had short-term plans for 1 week or bigger, but right now we know that we can broaden this strategic horizon, and we need to still think ahead how we have to work within 5, 10, 50 years. And again, whom who we can be teamed up with, because only by our joint efforts we can achieve more. And I think here it's also about the necessity of being united in Ukraine or with foreign partners, so we will be stronger.
We invited Georg also to comment as someone from the outside, working outside Ukraine, but who's working very in a way, connected way with Ukrainian artists. What we've heard a lot in this conversation has been the need to both create frameworks and structures and these connections, overcoming these historic narratives that need, in a sense, to assert and be clear about the way in which Ukrainian organizations wish to function and the way artists will be working in partnership. And I'm curious, Georg, from your point of view, as someone who's working specifically with Ukrainian artists in the context of, I mean, Austria specifically, but in terms of Europe, what resonates with you in terms of the ways in which Ukrainian culture, Ukrainian artists are now connecting with each other, asserting their practice and starting to build the kinds of relationships that are going to be an important part of the way the community builds this future ecology of Ukrainian culture.
Simon, first of all, thanks for letting me be part, or us be part of that wonderful conversation, actually, and it opened up a lot of questions in me there have been a lot of projections and counter projections, a lot of, so to say, closures even here, that I heard a lot of openings that might be productive, and there have been a lot of things that one doesn't see from the outside so much when you are not back. And it's the first moment, actually, that I am back. I have been here very often since the 1990s. I remember the first Ukrainian exhibition that I did in Vienna, in the Kunsthalle in Vienna, was 2006, just with the post-Soviet generation, with Mikhailov, Markov, Lederman, but already the reps, then 22, 23, 24, have been part of that, and it was the year when the Pinchuk Center opened. So later on, it was easier to talk about Ukrainian art because the Pinchuk had somehow opened, and it had all of these shiny events, but that was another projection around Europe, I would say. So it is quite complicated if you talk about Europe, and if you talk about the idea that Europe has about European art, and it's true that the imperial possession of Russia is very important. But we are sitting here in Lviv, and Lviv has a slightly different history. So it's not Eastern Ukraine, yeah, and it's not Southern Ukraine. It had other imperial, so to say, structures to carry. So it's much more multifold. And when I used to talk about Ukraine to my colleagues in the West, and I had the same conversations in Germany. Oh, Germany, they rather talk more about the global South than they would talk about the global East. That's something they really would like to leave to Russia. So I think that's really a tragic thing. But you have other allies if it comes to other regions. If you have allies when you talk about the Turk states, the former Turk states of the Soviet republics. In Italy, you have somebody in South America that you can talk to with similar histories. So that's what I always tried. But anyway, I think it is rather complicated. What I heard is, first of all, we are still in war. We had to go to the shelter yesterday, and there is still a lot of artists in war, and a lot of even friends of mine have passed away and have suffered. And we are already talking about futures, possible futures, which I find very productive, I have to say, because of there is a strange and ugly dialectics going on. This war, for the first time, makes Europe aware about Ukraine and Ukrainian culture is, and how it much differs, for instance, from Russian culture. Though a lot of the enterprises that we saw in the beginning, 2022, 2023, have, I would say, Soviet models of representation, shows that have been traveling, a bit like, I would say, following a certain path, and there has been always double layers. There's been felt for sure there's always been many communities. The Odesa people didn't like to talk so much with the Lviv people and so on and so on. This is still existing. So I'm representing here maybe a cloud or a bubble that is slightly different from the bubble that is gathered here. But nevertheless, Dana Kavelina is working on a piece that we commissioned for the next Kiev biennial, just a few houses away from here now in Lviv because she needs maybe some rest. What we did when the war broke out, after having all these different histories, having these shiny events of Pinchuk as well in Vienna, but as well we had Stella Foundation openings in the art historical museums with all that shininess, and Austria is even more dependent on Russian economies. We still have one of the biggest banks being active in Ukraine, in Russia, as in Ukraine, the Raiffeisen. Yeah, we are still very much dependent with the gas production on an energy production for our industries on Russian gas, and we still have 80% of Russian gas that is feeding, so to say, energy production. We still have a lot of oligarchs living in chalets in Kitzbühel and in Vienna and so on and so on. So it was pretty hard to when the war started to get people together. But as we had all these initiatives that have had an eye, so to say, to this global East, the former East in Austria, much more than they existed in other German-speaking countries, I would say. It was easy to say, hey, come on. Nobody would have believed when we heard the news in the beginning of February. Even the friends in Ukraine would have believed that the war would break out. But it broke out. And my first call was to the Austrian Ministry of Culture. And I said, we have to do something. And it was on the 23rd or 24th of February. And on the 28th, we had a conference with people from the civil society and from the art field, like us from Transit, Rotor from Graz, whom some of you may know, and Künstler aus Buxtenhausen from Innsbruck, and others said we must do something and we must be solidaric. But why must we be solidaric? Because there is a particularity in our solidarity. It is not, oh, there is a war and we have to be solidaric. There is a particularity in our solidarity. We have worked, we have cooperated already, and it is and we want to establish this cooperation and re-establish it further. And we saw that, and we heard that a lot of people would leave. So we said, what can we do for these people that leave? To the ministry and among us. And there was this idea immediately of mentoring, yeah? Because we had the experience of the 2015 refugee crisis. A lot of people have been coming from Syria, from the Arab world, from Afghanistan. And they disappeared somehow. Syrian artists, whatsoever, they had to show up for 10 minutes in a gallery, then they disappeared. So we said we don't want to have that. We want to be very specific. So we open it up to as wide as we can to any cultural producers that have an idea. It's now time to leave the country because I'm frightened, I'm in the comfort zone, I'm whatsoever. I want to take care of my children elsewhere. And we create something that is a bit dissimilar from other initiatives, namely a peer-to-peer initiative, so that we would try, first of all, for sure, aid of the moment, housing, legal consulting, and so on, but to try to make connections between artists, artistic practitioners, and the same in Austria. So that an artist maybe that is coming and would be linked to a gallery, or would be linked to a museum, would be linked to a non-profit space where he or she could work in. And that's what we made, as well as we asked the ministry to give us some money for projects, so that these people would not be just involved, but the people would have the chance to produce as well, yeah? Produce work and not be, so to say, the ones that just are taken care by this. I mean, the gift is one of the ugliest structures, and solidarity can be a very, very complicated structure. So we thought there must be money so that they can apply for something. Yeah. And this happened, and we must institutionalize somehow. So we institutionalized in the Office Ukraine. There is a book that we gave out like 2 years after the outbreak of the war. It shows that this happened. We had cooperations with more than 300 projects from the Kunsthistorische Museum to wherever, yeah. To the Salzburger Festspiele, to the Conservatorium in Vorarlberg, to the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna, and so on, to the Albertina, and so on, and so on, and so on. You can read that. You can read more about that, and it's we helped more than 1,000 artistic practitioners that came through the office to make their paths. Some of them left Austria, and so on, and so on.
And Georg, just fast forwarding to now, that's something then that you've developed over the last 3 years since the full-scale invasion. I'm just wondering how that informs your future work. What is the future plan?
I think the most important thing is that there is at the moment a need to think about possible futures after the war. I have to say, we have one project running, which is that the EEG Architecture, the community of Viennese Austrian architects, is working together with two offices in Kharkiv on possible reconstruction of the city and models for a future city in Kharkiv, which I find very important, so that it's not just investment architecture that takes over, but it might be another idea of a European city that could be implemented and ecologically whatsoever sustainable city, and so on and so on. I think this is one issue. The second issue that we are thinking about is to really bridge that gap that is existing, and even more existing, between that community that is maneuvering around Europe of Ukrainian artists and the ones that stay here. Yeah. So we want to establish bridge projects in Vienna as well around that, and as we did, work with institutions here. But that's a thing we anyway do, and we want to establish further. Thank you very much for having us here. And well, I think it is a very complicated state that you are in, because I know that I've learned about institutions in Ukraine over 20 years, and I've learned that there is a certain latency in the change of institutions. There is a certain latency how personnel can change, and so on and so on and so on. So I think this is a very, very challenging moment to implement something like new structures, yeah, into that new self-esteem of the country that developed through the war, and to get rid of certain normalities that still are obstacles to development. I think, and all of you are doing that, and I really appreciate it very much.
Thank you, George.
Дякую дуже.
Thank you so much. We are basically finished with exchanging comments and remarks among the invited speakers. So there is time for a Q&A session. I understand that everyone is already tired. That's why we are not going to have the next summary session. We will conduct it right now. So you can reflect on what has been thought from our panelists, and you can also share other ideas that are related to both days of our assembly. So we still have some time left to do that, and at this we will be done, because I don't think we need another session. It will be quite logical to finish it at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. Отже, мікрофон ваш, будь ласка.
So the floor is yours. Good evening, Oksana Kropovets, curator, historian of art studies. I have 3 main points. Shall I speak Ukrainian? Ukrainian, yeah. So 3 points about the strategy. it seems to me that the question whether we need to have long-term strategy, it's not relevant, because without the strategy, we can give up immediately. And this strategy, I live now in Paris, I work there, and what I have witnessed from outside as Ukraine is conducting its communication at institutions, how Ukraine is doing its cultural diplomacy, and by understanding the local context, I can reflect on this topic. First of all, this is the willingness to do a lot of things, but not hitting the right target. So, for example, connections between institutions. So, one level of institution requires the same level of institution or experts, but it looks like I was present at many events, talks, when this was a kind of typical framework. All these funds, all this energy could be focused, invested into long-term game, long-term project. Let it be a small research project of the one artist, or it can be a program for tens of years, but it will be more valuable than a range of events that are too general or talk about things in general. So we lack the strategy of combining people of the same level that you would trust. So this pop-up thing evokes distrust, and the Russians, what are they doing? They are actually acting through these agents who are working in Pompidou Center for tens of years. And this is also combined with big funding, huge funding. And when you have a collection of Russian art is in Pompidou Center, and a lot of money is donated, and the French curators are paid second salaries who are doing research around this collection and conduct events. So this is a strategy. Why are we losing? Because we get distracted, we do pop-up events, we do not hit the right target over and over again. And I think there are a lot of successes, but we need to focus on something particular. And we need to focus on those people who are really the drivers of change, who produce knowledge, and who can evoke trust, and we need to connect them with Ukrainian experts on this personal level. Secondly, this is not using potential of the new diaspora community. There are so many artists saying now in Paris, and they are really great artists who do everything themselves, they organize everything themselves, and there are artists who have been living there for 20 and 30 years. So Hrystyna Solomucha did a presentation. She's a Ukrainian woman artist. She was nominated for award of women art in Paris from the Ministry of Culture, of the French Ministry of Culture. She did an event devoted to Ukraine at the University of Decorative Art, and there was none of Ukrainian representatives. Nobody among Ukrainian representatives came and supported her. I did an exhibition at SIDA International Arts in 2023. None of Ukrainians came to my exhibitions, unfortunately, as well. There was only Olha Sagaidak who came during the production stage. And the third point, this is not using this potential that we need to invest into these agents. Ukraine, as far as I understand, this is happening in Paris, in Berlin, in Venice, and these people, you have to team them up, you have to invest in them, and there will be these agents who can achieve a lot, and they understand the local context. Another thing, this is lack of understanding of the local context and the discourse that are predominant in the local context. So we have, for example, Ukrainians, we have war, understand us now, but how do institutions work? What is a discourse that is important for them? For example, in France, it's important, the Orient is important for them, and the East. And you have to enter this context through these countries. So I did an exhibition with Syrian and Ukrainian artists, as well as artists from Myanmar and Libya, and something that Katya Radchenko mentioned. This is very important. This is super important. Ukraine can reinforce itself if it gets beyond its bubble, and if they start to understand which colonial discourse is important for each country. And the artists can be those bridge builders who can help to establish these connections. So we have to understand what kind of discourses are important for certain countries, and we have to use it to our advantage. And each locality has its own players that we have to rely on. That's it. Thank you.
Kateryna Yakovlenko. I have a general reflection on what has been said. So I would try to put everything what I was thinking about, but my first idea appeared after the story about the contemporary dance. So I think we need to go back to the basic issue and to understand what is that. Is it like someone who is, just is the contemporary dance of Larisa Venediktova, or these are just ladies who are dancing at the backstage of some singer? So Larisa Venediktova tries to gather active community around her, and right now I think that the way how we see the contemporary dance right now is it the part of the contemporary art, or this is the part of the theatrical practice, or this is a part connected with show business, etc. So for me, these are totally different things. I wouldn't combine them together. So, and talking about the research, it is important to make research in every of the areas and do not generalize. It's all about different methodology, about different communities, about our Ukrainian artists, about what did we do starting from 2022, because right now it's already 2025. Ask everyone self, what did you do? Of course, people have different tasks. We are all multitaskers. We work a lot, but it's also the question that we again address to ourselves. It's a great problem both for those culture actors who are here in Ukraine or abroad. Where do we need to look for information? Where you need to find that, especially for those who work with archives, with oral history connected with the cultural environment, etc. Very often it is unfortunately rooted in our ignorance, or sometimes we do not want to see something. When we say we do not know something, it's our personal reflection on that. Having spoken with a foreign curator, they say we do not know anyone. We Googled and found 3 people from Ukrainian artistic environment, Zhanna Kadyrova and someone else. So it all depends on how our Google system brain engine is set up. We need to reach out. We need to have this desire to do something. And whenever there is some project, and whenever there is any initiative, yes, it's important to reflect upon the quality of it. So is there any potential for the future or not? So Ira Polikarchuk and I, we have good experience working with Polish colleagues, secondary archive project, which is ongoing for the 4th year in a row. So that's an archive which is being used by the forum curators particularly those whom I'm familiar with, when they look for the Ukrainian art. 75 artists are reflected there. So, and sometimes when people say we cannot find in this digital era, it's just the question of how are you looking for the information, who you are reaching out to. Do you communicate with the Ukrainians? So yeah, that's pretty broad issue. So it's important to understand this search. As for the institutions, I think it's not just about the Pinchuk Art Center. There are lots of them, and there are different changes. There are many collaborations between Ukrainians and international institutions. So I here can promote another gallery, Goods from Europe, a wonderful name. Yeah, people say no connections with Europe, but we have gallery Goods from Europe. So whenever you have desire, yes, they will be open for you. So that's an initial question that was asked by Volodymyr about cooperation. So for me, it sounds like a critical one. Yes, if there is an interest from both sides, there will be cooperation. Another thing, how to make this cooperation sustainable, how to make it visible for the colleagues so that they can understand it and see it. Because sometimes we can do something simultaneously and people are not aware of that. So yeah, Facebook does not answer all the questions, but maybe there are other channels of promotion, etc., of how we can promote our cultural projects. So how to tackle this issue, I do not know, but maybe it worth asking more questions, try to keep in touch with the colleagues, try to indicate references in your texts, because sometimes we write about one and the same thing, but people just didn't read that. So yeah, some fundamental things about researches, we need to go back to that. But one of my biggest pains that was about my research, I felt that it is like kind of, it exhausted the understanding of my research, because, you know, to ask my friends, it's not just about research. No, we have to dig deeper. So that's all from me. Thank you. Yes, I think this is when we can we can call it a day. But still, I want to give the floor to Alentina. And don't forget that there is a glass of wine waiting for you in the cafe. Alentina, the floor is yours. A tiny remark from my end. It's great that it will be interpreted into English. I will proceed in Ukrainian. So talking about strategic cooperation with the international institutions, I would like to point out that it's painful for us, for Ukrainians, when we hear that when we have Endeavor Azor who will cooperate with us after the war. I would like to say we do not know whether there will be Ukraine. We do not know. We do not know whether we will make it. Maybe I will not make it. Maybe I will die sooner before the war ends. That's just my remark. We have concerns. And no one can be absolutely sure that Ukraine will survive. There is a great threat and danger hanging in the air. So if it is too subjective, sorry, but it's my humble opinion, because for me, war is continuing for 11 years. Sorry for that. Thank you. Thank you for this accent and this focus.
Reminds us, actually, there's no time to lose. And I think what has been amazing about these 2 days is the fact that there's a real realization that this is a real important moment to be building structures that can enable both individual artists to work, but also to build these future frameworks that we're talking about. So I think that's clear from these 2 days. There's an awful lot to do. I began this assembly with a long list of thank yous, and my list actually has got longer. I won't go through the whole list, but I really want to thank all of you for being here, for sharing your thinking, but also for the work you do and the practice that you put into reality every day. It's really crucial. There's an awful lot for us to be reflecting on, and from CEC ArtsLink's point of view, we are here to create these platforms, these connections, this ability to distill thinking and to bring people together. So we will continue to do that. But what will emerge from this will be, I think, a lot of initiatives and a lot of thoughts, and we'll find ways in which we can gather that and share it with everyone. I especially want to thank the speakers who were preparing their presentations and their thinking beforehand, and that's absolutely what informs the way in which we can develop our thinking jointly. Alevtina needs special thanks for her ongoing illustrations throughout the assembly, which I hope everyone has bought one by now, because she has a fundraising target, so we're all working on that. I really want to thank Bozhenia and the amazing team here at Jam Factory. Thank you, Bozhenia. We should also recognize Victoria and the cafe crew who have been feeding us so well and are about, and this is apologies to those of you watching online, but we're about to have the most gorgeous feast in the cafe, which you cannot join us for, but I hope you can find a way to do that wherever you are at home. So thank you all so much. I need to acknowledge there were two key funders that made this project happen. The Kirby Family Foundation, which is a small family foundation in the United States, but actually led by a visionary Mark Mushaw, who was very committed to supporting the assembly in Lviv. And the funds for the Podiumkunst, which is the performing arts fund in the Netherlands. They have an international department who were also very keen that this meeting could happen and that we could keep the dialogue and the conversation going. So those two funders made this happen, and we are very grateful to them. But I feel the biggest thanks are for you for being here in person in Lviv in this gorgeous art center, Jam Factory. Thank you.